You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
HRN is food radio supported by you. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org. Welcome to Pizza Quest. I'm Peter Reinhardt, and we are having a special bagel show. We've got our pizza Yodis, Brian Spangler, John Arena, the two Yodas of pizza, but we have also a third. I'm not even going to call him a Yoda. I'm going to call him our Gandalf of bagel, Phil Korshak. Phil, welcome back. We just had a great conversation with you recently when we were at the Atlantic City Expo, but now I've asked you to join us with our Yodis, because this is how Pizza Quest, these podcasts began, was with John and Brian way back at the beginning. During the pandemic, I think. And we've talked about a lot of things, but what's interesting is, in terms of like what's going on in the zeitgeist of the universe, is that bagels are huge, just as you are kind of bowing out of bagels, maybe. And we want to get an update on your story for those who missed the episode a few weeks back, where Phil brought us up to date on what I called a national story, the story of national breaking news that Korshak Bagels, suddenly had to close in Philadelphia for a number of reasons. We talked all about that on a previous episode. But at that point, when we left you, things were in limbo. And so first, before you give us an update on what's happened since and where you're at, welcome, Brian. Welcome, John. Thanks. It's been a while since we've had the Pizza Yodis on. So I'm so glad that we're all together again. And part of the reason that you're here today is because both of you are also passionately interested in bagels and are possibly, I know that John, you've been slowly perfecting your technique and are getting ready to introduce them. And Brian, I'm not sure where you're at with a piece of Scholl's. Are you going to be bringing bagels into that mix there?
No. You know how I like to. I'm always got my fingers in something.
I know you got 12 things going at once, but bagels is just one of the things, but not a menu item thing, just a passion project.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we got the passion, and we've got a work in progress in Las Vegas with Metro Pizza and the coming bagels, and then we've got Phil Korshak, the sort of the like I said, the Gandalf of bagels, who is going to give us, if you wouldn't mind, Phil, kind of catch us up a little bit on where things are at, because I know that our listeners really want to know what's happening with you, how you're doing, and if there's any plans on the horizon.
First of all, hi, good morning.
Welcome
Great
back.
to see you, all of you. Brian, I don't think I've seen you in a decade or more, and that was for like 5 minutes.
Right.
John, I haven't seen you in too long.
Way too long.
Pete, and Peter, I'm so grateful that you asked me to come to Atlantic City and hang out with you on the floor. That was really good for me. So we're now about 6 weeks out from when the shop closed. I've been very honored to have sort of multiple people want to keep it going.
Wow.
And it is wonderful, except it is sort of seasoned with the idea of like a 1930s movie where a bunch of kids are going to get it together and put on a show.
Yeah.
Like right. My mother has curtains and my father has a great set of tools, and if we all clap, it's going to work. And being that sort of person myself, it is really sort of hard to not treat it with the authenticity that it's being offered, and at the same time understand that it has nothing to bear with reality. And so all that means is the sort of big scale ideas of keeping it going are really nice ideas, but they have no bearing in reality. The bearing in reality is the question of what will happen to this space that I'm currently in, where for the last 2.5 years, I've been lucky enough to be associated with commerce and community being intertwined, like an incredible double helix. And the sort of importance for me of whatever place I have and what follows that is important. And we just got done showing its face to what may end up being a vegan deli, which I love because it has nothing to do with what I do other than the same sort of idea that I think all of us can relate to, which is doing a thing with integrity requires that you believe in it first.
Uh-huh.
Following through on that is fraught with failure and then likewise sort of revelation. John moving bread behind it is the perfect epitome of what I'm talking about. The idea that whoever's going to come in here next can continue on with that same idea of doing the thing they believe in because they believe in it. And then knowing that the only reason that that will then be resonant is because it will serve the community as a whole is, I think, sort of inside of the way that I always end up talking about it in terms of like music. So I think that I'm really lucky to have been in a place in a time where the sort of thing that I do and the way that I do it hit into a place of understanding for a whole lot of people. And that's great. And the way that I continue to like to think about it is like, with some humility, hopefully, Leon Russell put together a huge band to make a sound in the early 1970s that was massive and resonant and important from where it came from and what it led to. And then ultimately was sort of a point in its own that it couldn't really be a touring band. And the great thing is that almost everybody in that band went on to have other bands and do really great things.
Right.
I think that I got to put together a really good band. I think the reason I got to put together a really good band is because the years and years of trying to do the thing was essentially like me being able to be a roadie with respect to the thing that we do. So I have gotten to hang out in John's kitchen. I have gotten to be in the like studio of Tony Gimignani, which, having lived in Minnesota, Tony's in California, I want to be clear. But when I toured Prince's studio, Paisley Park.
Oh, yeah, in Minneapolis, yeah.
The feeling of being inside Tony's shop is exactly the same. And it's only to say, this is where genius is at work. And the genius isn't held to just the goat, but to everything that flows out of it. I am lucky enough to have been around long enough to have dough humans share with me their trials, their tribulations, and the thing that is consistent throughout is hope and dedication.
Mm-hmm.
If a bagel shop closes, hope and dedication doesn't stop.
Right.
For what will occur with me, once all of this is sewn up, then I more than likely will leave Philadelphia and start heading west to the West Coast to see, like Oregon is real pretty.
Yeah.
And a nice part of the world. And I think with the idea that in between that is the desert. And I have a fondness for New Mexico and Arizona and that part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it is there. And just the opportunity to work with other people who work with dough, or to connect with other human beings who want to do something different with the service industry and redefine the world in which we live. Well, I think that I'm really grateful that that continues to be the pilgrimage that I get to make, and not limited to an aspect of a craft. And I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity to be able to hone that, knowing that it is the discipline of dough that serves you throughout life. It is not the end of the road with every bagel that gets to become a bagel. It is, in fact, the beginning of the road for whatever dough will follow.
Well, you can all see. We see those who are listening to all this understand now why we love Phil so much. Between the analogies, the vision, and the the sort of the poetics of everything. And those who haven't been following him on Instagram, sometimes his poems are right there where you can read them. Let me just throw this open to John and Brian, because first of all, John is the one who introduced me to you about 10 years ago. And so John is our bridge to those. And John has been a bridge to so many people. Brian, I'm not sure, you guys connected somewhere along the line as well. But since you're kind of winding down to the end of the bagel phase before the next band pops up somewhere, whether it's in New Mexico or California, wherever you end up next. But both John is getting ready to sort of launch Bagels. Brian, you're getting passionately deep into kind of perfecting the bagel. Do you guys want to ask Phil any questions or comment on anything or jump in here?
John, you're the Bagels. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, the first thing I want to say is if Phil is the Gandalf, I'm more like the Gollum.
No way.
Oh man, you're Aragorn and you know it. You are Strider, son. You could be a lot of characters in that saga. You could be Samwise also. Right there all the time, right by his side. The loyal.
Well, I think we all feel the same way about it. That it's part of the same journey. It's part of the same quest. It's like we try to bring things to life. I was talking to Wiley Dufresne. I think you know Wiley, right, Peter?
Yeah, we've had Wiley on.
Right, and he said something I thought was interesting. Since he got into pizza and he started making dough, he said, chef, he was basically an undertaker. He takes stuff and he fixes it up and makes it presentable to the world. And right, making pizza dough, he was creating life.
Yeah,
and he was fostering life. And he was trying to make something great out of something that was living. And he just felt that it was so refreshing, and maybe that's what hooks us. Maybe we're all secretly Dr. Frankenstein. We look at these things and we get up in the morning and we look at it and we look up at the sky and we scream, "It's alive!" And
exactly. I think that's true. I think that so many people have been pulled into the world of fermentation, especially through dough, whether it's pizza, bread. It could be through beer making or winemaking or cheese making, but fermentation is such it's a huge category, but it's all about working with, creating something out of real life and not just, what's the word? Chemical, reactions, but it's about cultivating life, as you said. And I think, I've met so many bakers who have reiterated that in their own way. Everyone says it in a different way. But then that brings us into specifically bagels. Why do you guys think that bagels are happening in such a big way right now? I mean, Phil, when you opened Korshak Bagels a few years ago, it was just the beginning of sort of like this. We started to see stirrings of interest in bagels, and then you generated a lot of heat when you got heat and light when you got Korshak's open, and then suddenly they're popping everywhere. And it was around that time, and it's been a year or more that John and Brian and I have been talking about, we got to do a bagel show. But why do you think it's bagels? Why is bagels having its moment, another moment?
I think that there's something in the ubiquitous nature of the bagel inside of, I don't know, Northern America, at least, where no matter where you are or where you're from or where you grew up or whatever, there is some identification with a bagel that is beyond cultural. Part of where this doesn't serve our community currently is that part of that's predicated on a bagel has always been incredibly inexpensive, and therefore anybody can have one, which is, I think, where the bedrock of the sort of ubiquitous nature is. If you were a student, you could get a bagel. If you were just in between things, there was always a bagel. The 13th bagel is free. It's magic. But I think that everybody has a piece of that inside of their vocabulary of what it is to be in the world. I think that what's really interesting, in the same way that that is true of pizza, how wonderful to have been alive in the time where a definition of what pizza is has been evolving constantly and working against gatekeeping as well to express what any given human being's vocabulary is of how they integrate with the world. So pizza is like not just pizza. It is, what is pizza for you? And what does that mean? And then human beings get to sort of like come to an understanding that the thing they're talking about is maybe not the same thing.
Yeah.
And then the new thing that they understand together is really where the beauty is. So I think with bagels, there's again that ubiquitous nature of what it is. And so then it gets to the place of, as a baker, understanding that there are a whole lot of extra steps in there that are really important for it to be what it is, and not necessarily great for time or for space or for energy or efficiency. So I think that where we are currently, and both of you gats will be able to speak to this better than I will, the thing that you're looking for from a bagel surpasses the ubiquitous nature of it being inside the vocabulary of everybody. So we can make the thing that looks like the bagel probably within 6 hours if we cut all the corners.
Right.
And 99% of the world would look at that and go, cool, bagel.
Yeah.
And would consume it and, like not be the better for it because the dough wouldn't be developed. The glutens wouldn't have the protein exposed. And the human being who would eat it would end up being heavy and, like gassy. And I think that there's a part where, and this is the part for me, and again, you cats are going to be able to speak to it better. I can think of nothing else where you get to stand over a steaming cauldron that smells great and watch as the thing that is literally seething, right? That's the word.
Yeah.
Begins to expand with dough. And know that it is nowhere close to done yet. And it's still got to move through a bunch of different things to end up being the bagel. I like all the parts of making dough, all of them. And I like all the parts of baking, totally. But getting lost in the boil with the fact that the boil per side is, in my world, about 35 seconds.
Yeah.
Appeals to, I think, societally how an attention deficit disorder is common. And I do think that for bakers, nobody is all one thing. But for the most part, bakers I meet are pretty mellow and pretty sort of grounded because they can express their need for unreasonable control in terms of grams. And so with that, we know we can control that thing. And then we're sort of open to whatever else is going to happen because we know where we've exerted the control. I think with baking community, I think that's the case. So I think that for a baker who is like really, really excited about having a method that is unchanging, that it's the control part that they like and not the baking part that they like. I think that the reason bagels have a better or have the zeitgeist currently is that all of those extra steps, all of those places where you can't exert real control, are just more apparent. And I think societally, that is good. Like, I think that is part of the path and the journey. And so I think there's sort of like a piece about being a nerd and being a perfectionist, and not being a gatekeeping asshole about it. Yay.
There you go. There you go. Hey, well, Brian, you've always been really good at spotting trends before they break on the shore. You brought us in a previous episode, to be on the lookout for bar and tavern style pizzas before they splash big time. What is it about bagels that's got you suddenly, interested in and taking some of your attention?
Well, I think for me, bagels have been one of those elusive things. Just like the same reason why I got into pizza. Yeah, I had a lot of exposure to it early in life, and then I moved to these areas where it's a wasteland. And that's how I got into pizza. I couldn't find any good pizza. Have the baking background. I'll just do it myself.
Yeah.
Same thing with bagels. And for me, something I've been playing with since, what was that, 86? A friend of mine worked at a bagel shop when I was in high school. So I would go over there and hang out with him and help him. And in college, I made bagels.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And yeah, but it's something I haven't gotten back into until recently. John got me back into it, and I think bagels has been sitting on the sidelines, and for as far as like the reason why it's in vogue now, for lack of a better description, is that a lot of things have been kind of not forgotten about, but these simple pleasures that we're seeing having their explosion. It's the simplest, bagels are simple, but like pizza dough, and pizza it's simple yet elusive. Every action has a reaction, and Phil said 35-second boil. Well, every minute that you boil has to do with the density of your crumb and the bagel, and texturally how that all works together. And so yeah, I think right now, and it's a comfort food just like pizza. It's a common man's food just like pizza. And I think that's one of the reasons why it has been kind of quietly sitting on the sidelines, waiting for people to like kind of jump on it and give it the attention it deserves, and take it to another. I mean, we kind of saw that back in the late 90s and early 2000s with the explosion of Noah's bagels. Remember that?
Yeah. Yep. The steamed bagel.
Yeah. And thank goodness it's gone away. To me, that wasn't a bagel. It was pretty insipid bread, to be honest with you. I mean, it really was. It was like, oh my God, you put enough cream cheese on it, I guess. But there was no textural component to it. It was just fluffy, fast risen.
I saw that bagel. I saw that Noah's bagel as being a sign of taking the bagels from the sort of the ethnic communities from where they were sort of born into the mainstream, into middle America, by making it softer and fluffier. And that in a way kind of served as a gateway to bagels for a lot of people who might have been intimidated by them before.
It could be that. I think you're right. And also I think, when it comes to like a large scale expansion like they had, there's no way you can do that level of an expansion doing bagels the classic way of doing the boil. I mean, you now have like too many variables in too many locations. And yeah, I think it's, but I think you're right, is that they're trying to make it more accessible, because, you think about like, the Plain States and people who didn't grow up in a bagel culture, and, their exposure to bagels is very limited or anything at all. I mean, even growing up on the West Coast, there was very few bagel shops unless you were in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
The Bay Area, we had House of Bagels.
Yeah, House of Bagels, yeah.
Right. So that's where my buddy worked. That's where I started working in 86.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the bagel shop of the San Francisco.
Right, and then Barry Bonds, I guess, opened up a string of bagel shops around the Bay Area too.
I
But
didn't know that.
You,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you were in Oakland in '86.
I was in Sunnyvale.
What a time!
Yeah,
Wow, that's great.
and that area, and then I went to Santa Cruz, where I was making bagels in '87 through '90. I left Santa Cruz in '93.
Right on.
Yeah.
When you were working that gig, were you working machines? Were you hand rolling? Were you getting dough in frozen? Did you have to
At
knock
House
it
of
around
Bagels
yourself?
in high school, I was
Yeah.
I was helping shape, and I didn't get any time on the oven, but I would just jump in and help when I had extra hours. It was like a quarter mile from a high school, so
Right.
yeah.
But those bagels were formed by a machine, though, not by hand, correct?
We would shape them by hand, but they were pre-rounded.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
At the
But you
location
actually
I was
had-
at the location I was at, because they think they had 7 locations. To the higher, the from memory, because we're going on getting close to
Yeah.
40 years ago. The busier locations, we were in Sunnyvale. The busier locations up in Oakland,
San Francisco.
they had. I think those were all shaped by machines.
Well, that was that period of transition from hand shaping to the machines came in, and suddenly
Sunnyvale was a much slower location.
Yeah, so it's good to know that you learned how to
Cupertino,
originally that your entry into it was hand shaping, which
Right.
was one of the challenges for Phil. I think at your place was that you were committed to hand shaping and not to using the machine, which would have upped your production by 2 to 3 times every day. But
Yeah.
but there was something about that. Before I forget, Brian, you had to have a bagel with you, I think, today. Can you hold up the one that you were working on? So this is looks and for those who can't see this,
Wow.
that's a beautiful pumpernickel. Looks like a pumpernickel bagel with a beautiful shine. Well, tell us how you got there. How long was the boil on that one?
The boil on this was about 25 seconds. About
That's all.
12, 13 seconds per side.
Wow.
I rarely sit there with a clock.
Yeah.
I just watch it and react to it, because the water, I don't have the thermometer inside the water, because as soon as you put them in, the temperature of the water, depending on how many bagels you throw in, the size of the vessel, how much water, blah, 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 blah. I'm not doing this on a commercial level. It's just myself. So when I do things like baking at home myself, I've gotten to that level where I observe and react based on experience. So I might have been closer to 30 seconds.
That's that's a relatively short boil, but you got a beautiful shine on there. Great, it looks like those starches have gelatinized to a sheen.
Yeah, and there's some lye
in the water.
Right on.
Did you use lye at Korshak's, Phil?
No, baking soda.
Baking soda.
So only baking soda, and my thoughts were, one, it's going to give me a little bit of a quicker brown on the skin, but honestly, my caramelization on the skin's coming from the ferment, so baking soda is not doing a lot. What it is doing is that it is acting as a relaxant, in my mind, for the dough itself. So my dough is coming out of a 40-degree walk-in, going into 190-degree whatever.
Yeah.
Holy cow, good crumb. Yeah, man.
So Brian's holding up. He's holding up a sliced open version of that bagel he just showed us. And Brian, say a couple words so that we can get you on full screen.
Full screen.
There you go. There you are. And then and so, how much of that bagel is rye versus wheat?
Oh, there's this is only 10% rye, so this is more of like a Jewish deli rye.
Yep. Yeah.
So 10% dark rye, 1.25% caraway. But instead of using, because obviously classic pumpernickel is made from baking long temperatures, the classic German pumpernickel.
Yeah, it's a different thing.
Long Maillard reaction, baking for extremely long periods of time. Obviously, we don't do that making bagels, a lot of bagel wreaths will use caramel coloring to achieve this. And a buddy of mine in college back in, he used cocoa powder.
Yeah.
Cocoa powder. So that's what I use.
That's what I use. But so there's a little cocoa powder in
Cocoa
that.
nickel.
But cocoa nickel, yeah. So you've got cocoa powder. I've actually done it also with carob powder at times. But
sure.
And some people even use like instant coffee or espresso.
Right. And just to clarify, unsweetened cocoa powder for the people that are listening and watching.
Unsweetened. And then of course malt in the dough.
Yes, there's barley malt in the dough. And the way I've been making bagels, I'm trying to like push the limits. So for 12 bagels, all the water is in the pre-ferment. I'm doing pre-ferment. So all the water's in the pre-ferment. I'm doing about a 14-hour pre-ferment. I'm only using for 12 bagels at 125 grams weight per bagel. For the total formula, half a gram of instant yeast.
Wow.
Yeah.
So like
0.3 in the pre-ferment for 14 hours, and then another 0.2 in the final dough, and then after the bulk shape, it then goes into the refrigerator for 2 days for taking out.
So you're not in this particular bagel. Then it's only a small amount of commercial yeast, but no any sourdough yeast or natural fermentation as well. No. So yours is not. And then Phil, you were nodding your head because I know that yours was primarily a natural sourdough ferment, but also you were getting excited when Brian mentioned the pre-ferment. But is your pre-ferment more like a poolish, Brian? Is it really real wet, a wet pre-ferment?
So it's for the formula for 12 bagels. Got the formula right here in front of me. 500 grams flour, 500 grams water, and
so, that's a classic.
0.3 grams of instant yeast. 14 hours at that, and then in the final dough is the remaining flour, salt, barley malt, and
So before I jump back to Phil's thing, I want to put up a couple photos of John's recent bagels. So we've got some shots that we're going to look at. John, can you talk us through a little bit of your process of how you created your bagels as we look at the photos that are coming up? There's a let's look at there's the shaped version. Those who aren't able to see these, we're looking at a photo of hand-shaped bagels. It looks like it's a classic white dough. Would you say, John?
Yeah, but my method is very similar to Brian's because basically when I'm in trouble, I call Brian and I just scream, "Brian, bagel!" And we talk it over. You'll find we usually hit on a method that's pretty similar, if not exactly the same, certainly not exactly the same, but always something that we can both relate and evolves from the same ideas.
So we looked at a photo then. If you went into the boil, what's in your boil?
A little bit of baking soda.
Baking soda. So now
but occasionally I put some liquid malt in there.
Malt into the boil itself. I know a lot of bagel shops do add malt to their water. That's one of those areas where I guess it's baker's choice what you're going to boil. Some boil only in water. Some boil in salted water. Some in sweetened water. Montreal bagels are baked, boiled, I think, in honey water. So there's so many different ways to do it. But so is your fermentation a combination of wild yeasts, sourdough and commercial yeast?
It's a combination of wild yeast and fresh yeast.
So now we're getting kind of the hybrid of all these different methods. You got the Korshak bagel, which is mostly sourdough, but you also, I think, spike yours with a touch of yeast, right, Phil?
Oh, you bet. Yeah,
you bet. And then John is similar. You're kind of down that track. Brian did his with yeast only, but with a long pre-ferment and long fermentation to develop.
And barely any yeast.
What's that?
And barely any yeast. And still getting an incredible crumb.
Time is the biggest thing there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
3 days.
so I love the fact that we've got, three dough geniuses all getting there in different ways, which I think is an important takeaway from this conversation, is that there's no one absolute way to do this. There's many ways.
Yeah, the thing that is consistent for the three of us is that pre-ferment. So all three of us are rocking that Biga or that Pulis or that Levain or whatever the appropriate term is before we get to that final dough. For mine, it would be everything but the flour and the salt in the mix, whereas the barley with one. What's going to go into the water is dealer's choice. But that pre-ferment, I think, is consistent for the three of us.
So what's your pre-ferment is the sourdough starter, right? Or do you have another pre-ferment?
I've got the sourdough starter, but I'm rocking almost the same thing of 50-50, where it's 100% of the water. It is all of the liquid with the sourdough, with both of the malts, with the little spike of the yeast. And that does the 12 to 14 before then it hits the mix with the flour and the salt.
Yeah. Okay.
And then it will get the table, it will get a bulk rise, and then a cut, and then a form, and then the overnight, and then the boil and the bake.
So, John, is that kind of similar to the approach you took, getting your starter and everything in the beginning, and with a big wet sponge?
I'm using a sourdough starter. That's 100% hydration, and 50% of my flour. 25% of my flour is in that pre-ferment. I'm letting that sit for about 18 hours.
Wow.
I do my complete mix. 18 hours, but that's like 60 degrees.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah.
5 degrees. And then I'm doing that mix. I do a short rest, like for an hour bench rest. Put it in the cooler for 48 to 72 hours. Bring it out. The last 6 to 8 hours of my time in the cooler is uncovered. So I'm putting a little bit of a crust on them.
They get a little skin.
Right.
Yeah.
So then my boil is it's a little bit longer. It's about probably close to a minute. And then a bake at 450.
And John, you've been playing with this, with perfecting your technique in this. How close are you to actually being able to present them, through the menu, putting them on the menu will be at Metro Pizza?
That depends on how crazy I want to get, right?
Yeah. How hard do you want to work?
I don't know. So far, I think part of the quest is that we have this thing in our minds. I'm sure Phil and Brian will agree with this. We have this mythological pizza in our mind, or this mythological cheesecake in our mind, or this mythological bagel in our mind that probably never even really existed.
They call that the platonic bagel.
Yeah.
And I mean that's part of the, I think part of the search for the Holy Grail is a little bit of knowing that it was real.
Yeah, bringing the ideal to Earth.
That it's the possibility of it that keeps us going forward.
Yeah. But what do you foresee needing in order to do this? You're going to need to add new equipment to your kitchens. Or you've got to get a kettle. You've got to, have room to be able to make your pizzas and everything else that you do at Metro. Plus, then add a line of bagels. Is that going to be, or are you going to have a separate sort of commissary operation?
Well, there's 5 or 6 hours in the day where I'm sleeping or wasting all that time. So,
yeah. What are you doing?
Oh, ne'er-do-well.
When are you going to get to work?
Lollygagger.
So, but do you see the need to? Are you going to, first of all, are you going to try to squeeze that right into the pizzeria? Or are you going to have a separate shop to produce these?
My main commissary, which you guys, I think all of you guys have seen, it's pretty big, and it's not used from 12 o'clock at night to 5, 6 in the morning.
So you got space for it there. Okay, good. Yeah.
Bagel hours, right?
Yeah.
Perfect.
So that answers that question, and then it's just a matter of kind of like working out a system and a plan and training your people to be able to produce them consistently on a regular basis?
At this point, my people consists of me, and if I can rope Phil into staying here on his way to Oregon.
There you go.
Not going to take a big rope.
Wait a second. I just heard an offer on the table, Phil. You got to add that to your list. Your pad of options.
I could not be more blessed. I honestly could not be more honored or blessed.
Would that be cool? Would that be cool? Well, if it happens, remember, those who are listening, you heard it all here first. Breaking news on Pizza Quest. Well,
the thing that John is doing that I would want to see and feel with my own hands, because I know it's smart and I know it's good and I know why I didn't do it and I know why I wanted to do it, was that bulk ferment before the cut to form. That I think is glorious and a very, very smart move for what's going to happen with the dough. And likewise, I'm so grateful to have heard out loud what I suspected. So if John shows the picture again, the overhead of the cooked bagel, that tear in the skin and that cobweb on the dough that's underneath it.
Let's see if we can get that photo back up on the screen, Jeff, if you have a chance. Well, our producer, Jeff's going to try to get that photo back up for us.
I will note that what any human being decides is beautiful or not beautiful is really arbitrary, right? It kind of is. But that bagel, that dough, that look, that is to John's point, sort of my holy grail of what I want the skin of a bagel to look like and why.
So we're looking at something that's very close to that platonic bagel or that holy grail bagel that we were talking about, that he kind of nailed it. And you're saying that would be your target, something along that line.
It totally is. And it is inside for me of what is happening in the tear of the skin and the exposure of the dough underneath it. And that's only going to happen, I think, due to that big bulk ferment and the cross-hatching of the trays and getting the skin on the dough before it hits that boil. That's what I think is going down.
Phil,
wow.
I think it also, for me, creating that stirrup and working against the table, almost like when you're shaping a French bread, and creating that surface tension. I think that's a big part of it too. You see a lot of people that are just basically rolling a dough ball and poking a hole in the middle.
Yeah.
Why they're doing that? You got to crank these things out. But I think when you make a stirrup, you shape it together, you squeeze it together, and you work it against the table, I think that motion is adding a surface tension that changes the exterior texture. Brian, how do you feel about that?
Well, I think what I instinctively thought of when I saw the tear is that you're getting a lot of spring from the conduction from the hearth. That a lot of times you'll get that massive, and as well as the fact that you're allowing the skin to dry out. So a combination of those two things.
It is pretty dramatic. We're starting to get down to what is it about a baguette that makes it so appealing to people? And it has to do with the way it blooms open where it's cut and scored in a way that has tremendous eye appeal. And for a bagel, which is much smaller, the eye appeal is more subtle. But it's not just a smooth. Although Brian, yours was pretty smooth all the way around, and I think a lot of people would assume that's the target. But what John and Philip are saying is that they don't want it to be just totally smooth. They'd like to see signs that it has sprung in the oven, that it started to tear a little bit and open up and bloom a little bit in a few spots. Is that correct? Am I saying that correctly? Would you say?
That's definitely what I was shooting for with that one, Peter. And then if you look at some of the others, I think I might have had some other ones where I was shooting for that micro blistering that I try to get on my pizza crust.
Yeah, the blistering.
Yeah. Your micro blisters are great.
You might be able to show a picture of that. I think I sent you some pictures of those.
I think we have that, and I think that the blistering that we saw in the bagels very. I guess that has a lot to do with the fact that you were able to develop a skin during the rise before it went into the boil. And then that skin kind of trapped those carbon dioxide pockets as they were trying to escape and cause blisters in the surface. Is that then your bagels have that same look, don't they, Phil?
They do. I think it's that, and I think it's the time on the dough. Now that fermentation's rocking.
Yeah, yeah, long, yeah. And
Yeah.
Brian, can you hold up
Acid
yours?
production?
Can you hold up your bagel again, real quickly, if you have any left?
Me?
Yeah, yeah. Just I want to say, so we're looking
I
at.
can't have one.
I wish I could have a bite of that because it looks so good, but but I'm seeing it looks like there's some blistering in yours as well.
There's without doubt blistering on that.
Minor. Maybe if I increase the temperature up, a little bit. How's that look?
Yeah, it's good, and
There's
yet,
some minor blistering there, and I've always attributed all the blistering to the acid production from the retarding of the dough and the long cold bulk ferment. More so, you get more of that with sourdough.
True. Right.
But yeah, there's some blistering there, but it's minimal compared to what you're seeing in John's photo.
Oh boy, I'm getting pretty excited about bagels again. It's like when you because of all the ferment around bagels in the last year or two. I started to rethink my own perception. I used to always think of bagels as being not an artisan product, but it's sort of a mass-produced product. That's how I didn't think of it as anything special. The crumb was tight. I was always looking for open crumb, but that wouldn't be appropriate in a bagel. It's fast. It's there's all these different things but yet when hearing you guys talk about it, there's so much thought that goes into from beginning to end of what you end up, the consumer ends up with for $1, $1.25 or $3 or whatever it is that they're paying for that one unit. It went from $1 a bagel was a pretty good deal. And I know that Phil, you were getting $3 a bagel, I think, at Korshak's. Was it $3?
Yeah,
$3 a bagel. And nobody batted an eye because number one, they recognized the artisanship that went into it and the specialness of that bagel. And so there's everything in between. The bagels, I see it, and also the fact that just by the very fact that any kind of decent bagel has to have at least a long cold fermentation, which kind of moves it into the artisan category already, because now you're dealing with, advanced fermentation. Bagels are really just as artisan as baguettes and ciabattas and the classic European breads.
Sure. It's anything you make anything artisan if you want, anything worth doing.
Yeah. Well, do you think that's at work now in the bagel shops that you're seeing popping up around the country? I know the Bay Area has gotten a few good ones. There's some more in addition to Korshak's in Philly. There are other bagel shops in Philly. Are bagels? Are you seeing that same kind of passion and attention to detail in the new generation of bagel makers that we saw in the bread makers and the pizza makers of the last 20, 30 years?
Are you asking me?
I'm asking all of you.
Oh, I do, but I'm seeing it I think COVID has brought a lot more attention to it, and we have we've had about 3 or 4 pop up here in the Portland metro.
And of course, Portland,
I think there's more to come because there's still a lot of here on the West Coast. There's certain kinds of bagels that people still don't make, and you never hear of, like egg bagels. Which is one of my favorites.
That's right. Did you make an egg bagel, Philip, at Korshak's?
You bet I did. We did the egg bagel, and we also topped it with the everything topping, turning it into the egg everything bagel.
Right.
And so my move with it was egg yolk and turmeric. That is how I got it there. Staying away from the egg white because I didn't want that happening into the structure of the dough. And the thing that I found from the egg bagel that we ended up making was that it did this really nice sort of straddling between being a bagel and being a brioche. So all of that beautiful fat in that dough gave the inner structure of the dough this quality that was borderline brioche.
Brioche or even challah. Right. when you use
Yeah.
egg yolk and turmeric. A lot of people do that in their challahs as well. That's so yeah, that's kind of cool. And I completely forgot about the egg bagel category because that's its own thing. We had we've had Jacob and Alex Cohen on, who have Kismet Bagels in Philadelphia, and again talk about the pandemic. I mean that bagel operation, which is now producing quite a few, I mean, in the thousands of bagels a day now, started as a little home passion project for during the pandemic by this husband and wife who just started making bagels for their friends, and it just caught on. It just went. I hate to say viral, but it tipped over. So there's definitely a desire for, and they were in a high growth mode even before you closed Core Shacks. They're probably maybe they'll pick up a little bit more business since then, but and of course they make theirs in a totally different way than the way we've been describing it here. We could talk about bagels for hours. We're running out of time. I just want to kind of like maybe just give everybody a chance to have some final comments here before we call it a day. Anyone want to add something that we didn't get to talk about yet?
I only want to add, that for sure. And I'll come to your coast and we'll make egg bagels together.
Yeah.
The question of why is it more small batch? Why is it more independent bakers doing small things? Is who's going to wake up and decide they want to be a conglomerate or get it together where that's what they're going to do? No disrespect to like Einstein Bagel, or no disrespect to whatever massive pizza chain is out there. I don't know anybody who wakes up and goes, okay, that's the thing that I want to replace, or that's in the wheelhouse of what you need to do to make an operation that is that massive. Or Lender's Bagels, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who's going to wake up and go, and like it would be a fine market to do, and it would be a good thing to do, and all that other stuff. But that's not really within the wheelhouse of what it is to be in the world and present. And I think that one of the things that I'm really grateful to have been able to know John and learn from his example of being at the same time a student and an instructor is that all of us are just trying to do the thing that we think is true. Being a big conglomerate isn't really that.
Yeah.
I think this thing that what we're all trying to do is the thing that we think is appropriate and right, that works for us, knowing that, and this is the part, fellas, that we all know is true, we can make all the bread in the world and be really satisfied with what we did and how we did it. But until somebody eats it, it doesn't mean anything. And whether they give us the respect that we think we deserve or not, shouldn't be integrated into why we do the thing. Right? We do the thing with integrity because why else you can do it any other kind of way? And you make the thing because ultimately you're not the one who's going to eat it. And isn't that nice?
Yeah.
And I think that is the common piece. But again, these cats have way more experience to me, way more success, and can speak better for themselves.
Well, last call for Brian, John. Any final comments before we call it a day?
Well, what Bill was saying there, I think Bianca put it pretty well. Was he said we all put up smoke signals in the hopes that other people can read them.
Beautiful.
Yep.
Pete, I think for me, we're seeing this evolution. You mentioned it earlier. This evolution that's following along the same progression that pizza took. And what I would like to see with bagels, my hope is that we don't lose our inherent bagelness in the quest to. And by that I mean,
wait, in the quest of what?
In the quest to be artisans.
Oh, okay.
We're seeing people that have got into bagels now, and they're basically applying the exact same principles that some people were getting attracted to with bread, in terms of structure. But there's a departure where it's really not a bagel anymore. It's now a ciabatta with a hole in the middle.
Right.
And to me, that's not that much better than what those other guys are doing, which is Wonder Bread with a hole in the middle.
Right.
You know, I wanted to still be a bagel.
Yeah.
There's that curmudgeonly get off my lawn part of me that's like, leave it alone. Like, yeah, we want to make the greatest bagel we've ever had in our lives, but we don't want it to lose what that represented to us and what our ideal was. And, you know, I know that there's going to, and I'm sure Brian will agree with me because we know who will probably do it. At some point, there'll be a guy that does bagels with 105% hydration.
Yeah. and it will go viral on Instagram and everybody else will start doing it. Yeah.
Are we going to hyper mix it while we're at it?
and bake it in a vacuum oven. So there's so many things that could happen, but what we're here celebrating today, I think, is the fact that we've got, you know, 3 true artisans in their craft, committed to, you know, to as Phil said earlier, you know, doing something we can all be proud of and that bring joy and pleasure to the people who consume the things that we make. So I want to thank all of you. Again, our pizza Yodis, John Arena and Brian Spangler, and our now our bagel Yodi, or as I referred to him before, our Gandalf of bagels, Phil Korshak. We've got to do it again. It's been too long to get it since we've had all you guys together. And I want to thank you for joining us today, you know, on Pizza Quest. And we'll get you back and we'll keep this conversation going. And Phil, you'll let us know 2 things, you know, what you decide to do next. And when you land in Las Vegas and start making bagels with John, or land in Portland and start making bagels with Brian, we want to know about that, because then you know, it's kind of like the world the world will tilt on its axis a little bit more.
You honor me. The one thing that I've never been is quiet. So you know, thank you for making time for me to be able to connect with all of y'all. It really, really is an honor. And the affirmation in working with Doe and doing what we do, of being able to have a conversation where all 3 of us do it differently.
Yeah.
And are encouraged by that, I think is the big sign. Like, that's the big, beautiful thing. And thanks, Peter, for being the one to expose that as being normal. Appreciate it.
Well, I'm honored to be in the same room, so to speak, with all of you. And thank you for everything that you're doing to advance the craft. And for those of you who are watching or listening, join us again next time for another episode of Pizza Quest. And we'll keep these conversations going. We're all on this quest together. So, as we say, it's not just about the pizza. It's more about the quest. Thank you, guys.
Pizza Quest is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.